call you the vice president for student affairs. No, but interim. Just because I'm going to make you. How's that?
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you, Regent Cerna, and thank you all for having us here today, as always. The presentation today is one of the things that, as we were thinking about what might be interesting to talk with you all about it at this point in time, where we found ourselves thinking is really, as we emerge from the pandemic into the endemic, that there are some highlights from the last couple of years, and we all know what the lowlights are, and there were many of them, but really wanting to highlight some things that stood out for us that we thought represented Cougs at their best, because that is one of the things that we saw on all of our campuses the last couple of years, is we saw over and over again Cougs stepping up. Each of the campuses has contributed some information, some things that they thought about that were worth sharing from their campus, and I'm going to go through some of those. They're not necessarily in order because they kind of fell together in some interesting ways, so it may be a little bit less linear than some presentations that we do. And the other thing is that some of the highlights involve students stepping up, and some of them involve staff and faculty. But I think you'll get a flavor for some things that we're proud of in terms of how we operated the last couple of years. So let's see if I can. Do I have to point at a certain place?
Just on the computer should be.
This is one of those where I push it 3 times and then suddenly it goes ahead like 3 slides. Do you want to help? That worked.
That's the, not in the center, but on the.
Oh,
the side.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Whew, okay, little technology. One of the things we thought we would talk about is some things we're proud of. Most of this is focused on the Pullman campus. As you all think back, in fall of 2020, I think it's interesting to remember we had only 750 students living in our residence halls that normally house about 4,600 students. And those students really had the need for connection, for service, for support, because 750 living in those halls meant there was a lot of isolation, even for students who weren't isolating intentionally. The following spring, that doubled, but we still saw some of the same dynamics in terms of what our students needed. And I thought I would just highlight, sequester housing was provided to 241 students up until just this last month. And dining services has delivered now more than 2,400 meals to students needing to isolate because of either a positive COVID test or signs or symptoms. And throughout this, whether we had 750 students, regardless of how many students we had in isolation, housing and dining continued to provide in-person service. This is one of the areas where we still had professional staff and paraprofessional staff living in those halls, really trying to make sure that those students were connected, that they knew we knew they were there, that they were seen, that they were supported. And that just felt like a shout out was sort of needed to be done for those staff that really stepped up. And then we'll highlight just in recreation, when we shifted over to online in the spring of 2020, I thought I would note that the classes that were online, I admit I was pretty skeptical. It's like, oh, we're going to shift to online recreation classes. And I thought, how does that work? They were amazingly well attended. Students logged in and showed up for Zumba classes, yoga classes, all sorts of things that they could do where they were not alone, even though they were in their own residence hall room or apartment room. See, she gets it. In the medical space, wanted to highlight some things. More than 7,500 students participated in spring arrival testing in spring of 2021. And Cougar Health Services on the Pullman campus has now given more than 4,000 vaccine doses at mass vaccination clinics between April and February of 21-22. And one of the things I want to highlight here is, I talked about volunteerism. These mass vaccination clinics are an exercise in logistics. It is amazing sort of to march that many students through. And we had volunteers, not only staff from University Recreation and other areas on campus, we had students volunteer to help at those clinics. And we couldn't have done it without them, to be honest. CHS has administered now, actually even more than that number, probably close to 2,000 booster shots to Pullman students in this semester alone. And I want to highlight some cross-campus collaboration here. The College of Pharmacy really partnered with the Pullman campus to come to campus and help with the arrival testing and some of those clinics. WSU Spokane also hosted vaccination clinics for their own students on the Spokane campus and also for the Spokane community. They also collaborated with community partners such as Spokane Regional Health District on things like the Mask Up Initiative, where they passed out more than 500 masks to adults and children across the Spokane community. And then a little shout out to Student Affairs Marketing and Communications, who created signage and communications for all of these efforts. And if you walk into any campus building, including the one we're in right now, and there's a sign on the door that says masks required, etc., those were all recreated by Student Affairs Marketing and Communications and then distributed system-wide to be sure that students and faculty and staff kind of knew what was expected of them and also what was available to them. As I've already alluded to, virtual student life really thrived during this time. Campuses really throughout the system found ways to engage students, and I'm going to give a couple highlights in the next couple of slides. I already talked about the university recreation courses. This photo is actually from the adventure program at WSU Vancouver, and it highlights the return to in-person. And of course, we could do some of that earlier in outdoor activities than we could in indoor activities. And so this is a great shot of some Vancouver students, I think just having a good time and being together. I said I would highlight a couple virtual bingo nights. Again, if you had asked me, are students going to show up for virtual bingo? I might have been skeptical. They showed up. Not only did they show up, but they showed up in droves. And I think they showed up partly for the bingo because it was fun and competitive and all of that. They also showed up because it was hosted by WSU Global Campus Connections, but they rotated the sponsorship. So each time students participated, they got a different kind of engagement in terms of some programs and activities and making sure they had information, might be focused on a particular academic area, or it might be focused on something else. And so those were actually, I would call that one of the great successes over the last couple of years. I'm actually going to ask my colleague, Anna Clemens, to talk a little bit about the Carrying Cougar Cards project, because this was, I think, initiated from the Tri-Cities campus.
Yeah, I'm not sure, I mean, we participated for sure.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Yeah, so Carrying Cougs, it was a system-wide effort, and I know Global's always a strong participator in that. Tri-Cities also participated, and the idea is that students will get together and write cards that then go out to key community partners. For us here, it was SARC, the Support Advocacy and Resource Center, and we had, through that event, we had 20 cards that were sent out, so that's at least what it looked like on the Tri-Cities.
Right. And I think every campus, well, I know every campus participated in this, and we're sort of noting it as the first ever system-wide community service project because all 6 campuses were in fact involved in their own campus, but they did it kind of together and coordinated that. So we have talked in this committee before about fundamental needs and the challenges of fundamental needs, and that continues to be a challenge. The pandemic certainly highlighted and exacerbated it. Multiple campuses increased their food assistance efforts to students to ensure that students had enough to eat. Several of the Cougar food pantries offered both pickup and delivery service, so they would deliver especially to students who were isolating, or students who were off campus and didn't have ready and available transportation. And so instead of having to find a friend to take them to the food pantry would come to them and bring them what they needed. Highlighting a partnership with the community in Spokane with Second Harvest. And then at Thanksgiving on the WSU Pullman campus, food pantry staff distributed Thanksgiving meal kits to students living off campus, and our dining services delivered plated Thanksgiving dinners to students who were in isolation because they couldn't go home. They were prohibited from going home, and so our dining services put together Thanksgiving dinners, plated them, and we delivered them to them. So that was a way to let them know that we cared about them at a time when it was really hard for a student to not be able to go and be with friends or family during Thanksgiving. Vancouver, this is something, again, it's one of those things that came out of the creativity, the need to be creative. They conducted 27 off-campus financial aid outreach events in the fall of 21. This is a new initiative for them. 20 of these were fully virtual, 3 were in person, 4 were hybrid, and they included things like podcasts. A couple of the events were in Spanish. And in addition, they've done 11 in-person outreach events on campus, and almost 2,000 students and their families have been reached by this financial aid information, which again, during the pandemic, has been so critical for students to have access to. We've also talked about mental health challenges in this committee, so that's not new for any of us. I think this is just highlighting, again, the very rapid pivot to online programming, and a little bit of a shout out to all of our service providers for doing that. But also highlighting here at Tri-Cities, student leaders stepped up. And this is, again, one of the things we talked about is students care about this, as well as staff and faculty caring about it. And the students here collaborated with counselors to sponsor events that enhance student well-being during the pandemic. Again, a couple highlights from Vancouver. They initiated the Quick Start program in October of 2021 and incorporated it into their preview days. Preview days are opportunities for high school students to learn about the campus and learn about the university, learn about academic and student life. And these events are held at local high schools. And with this Quick Start program, seniors with a GPA of 3.0 or higher are invited to apply on the spot, and they receive same-day admissions decisions. And 133 students have attended, and 116 new COUGs were admitted through this program. On the Pullman campus, Student Affairs initiated what we called the Save the Sophomores campaign, knowing that we were at risk of losing students, even more so than usual. Called, I think, almost every first-year student, checked in with them, answered any questions that they might have, made sure they knew about services and resources that are available to try to help them return for that second year. Kim?
And that was actually a system-wide effort. So each campus made phone calls to students who had been enrolled for that semester and had not yet enrolled, or subsequent term and had not yet enrolled for spring. And so what we did is parse them out by affinity areas we knew they had participated in, been connected to, and then had someone in that sphere call them and say, hey, we've noticed you haven't enrolled for spring. What's your plan? Are you coming back? What do you need to know? What are you missing? And I shared this story, I think, in our prep meeting. One of the students that showed up on my list was actually a student that was born and raised in Pullman that was a friend of my son's. And he was like, wait, are you Charlie's mom? Yeah, I am actually. And so, and we've stayed in touch. So as he's continued to matriculate, he reaches out when he has a question. So.
And he did continue to matriculate.
Yeah.
So one of the success stories.
It was.
Yes, I think it highlights that point, and we've talked about this a lot, that students persisting and completing to graduation, there's a data point out there that they are more likely to persist and graduate if there's at least one person on campus who knows their name, a faculty member or a staff member. That young man, there's someone who knew his name.
Yeah.
And so, I think that, again, that's just an example of the importance of this kind of outreach and the fact that it was designed around those affinities that students naturally have. So someone sees me, someone knows who I am, and they care about whether I return. We all know the importance of milestones and of our society's rituals around milestones and celebrating them. And one of the things that the pandemic certainly did was cut into our ability to celebrate things that our students had accomplished. And so multiple campuses, several campuses, held drive-through graduation celebrations in the spring of 2021. So these were students, graduate and undergraduate students, who were graduating after a year and a little bit more than a year of being completely virtual. And so they could drive through campus and get cheered and hollered at by their family, by friends, faculty and staff got out there. We waved COUG flags. And the feedback on this, I've got to tell you, it has been just overwhelmingly positive. We still hear from people who say, that was so wonderful that you did that. I think the families really appreciated the opportunity to do something that felt like celebrating this huge accomplishment that their COUG had just achieved. And then last, this is a photo from WSU Everett. can't highlight enough how fun it is and how awesome it is to be returning to the in-person experience. This was a science lab day kind of thing that they were doing. You can see they've got robots and things going on that I don't actually know that much about. And doing it with, again, still being creative and being responsive to the needs, masking up as we certainly all here are today. And I think we will continue to do that moving forward. We know that we're going to have to continue to be nimble and respond to whatever post-pandemic life and academic life looks like. And so I'm sure there'll be more about that in the presentations to come. And I think that is it for my presentation. Any questions?
In your review on campus, is it still this feeling of excitement because we went from 2 or 3 freshman classes never having any experience, and all of a sudden you have the equivalent 3 years worth of freshmen on campus. Is that held over? Is there? Well, we've had the masking and stuff that deters some of that. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually was just meeting with a student leader on, I was going to say on Friday, it was actually yesterday. And I do think the excitement has continued. I think you're sort of referring to the fact that we had a group of sort of juniors who had their year interrupted and so on.
Well, they were juniors, but they've never really been on campus. Sophomores missed their entire freshman year, and then they were
Right.
freshmen.
Yeah.
Right.
Like 3
Yeah.
new classes all at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's leveled out. And I think some of that, sort of the natural underlying sort of developmental phases that the students are at has sort of leveled out. I haven't heard any stories that I know we were very aware of that, of feeling like we've got 3 classes of students who are on campus for the first time ever. And there was a certain amount of, what's this gonna look like and what's it gonna be like? I don't think any of the horror stories that we were afraid of have actually come to fruition. And the students have just been great. I mean, they know they are delighted to be in person, most of them, the vast majority of them. But I think they also know, that they've kind of been through a special set of circumstances. And there's a real recognition of what that has meant for them and what it has meant for the staff and faculty. I will say with the anticipation of masking rules being lifted next week, I think there's excitement about that. And we are continuing to try to work with them to say it's still the best way to protect yourself. It's the best way to protect others if you're not feeling well, whether it's from COVID or it's from a cold or the flu. We now have sort of as a society come to a place where we can maybe look out for each other in those instances. And that we don't know what the future will bring. I was talking to a student again yesterday and said, it may be that in a few months we have to go through another spell of masking. And then maybe we won't, and then we will, and then we won't. And we're all just gonna have to be kind of sort of take it in stride. And I think the students have really gotten to a place where, for the most part, they're pretty comfortable with that.
Can I add just one thing too?
Yeah,
I
of
think
course.
to your point, Regent Blankenship, there's a couple of things. One, we joke about that our student population has been really testing the efficacy of the vaccine on a regular basis. Because they are gathering, they are doing what they want to do, they are being social. The other aspect I would say is that as we've seen these students come to campus, they are a generation whose parents have been very closely involved, or their families and supporters have been very closely involved in their educational process, right? They've been watching them do homework at their dining room table for 2 years. So that's been a shift in dynamic, I think, for us on the administrative side, on the staff side, is how deeply engaged parents are in getting their students through the process. And this a different relationship there. So that's been one aspect that I think all of us are still sort of navigating and figuring out.
Okay, maybe.
Other questions?
I mean, I think of a lot of things. I'm curious about GPSA, graduate professional students, and it's hard because I'm like, there were many things that I've heard about from GPSA, but you also can't cover everything, I'm also curious about childcare and what that looked like for students. And if there were initiatives around that, but again, you can't cover everything, every positive way that COUGS came together around the pandemic. So
Right.
I think these were great examples, and I enjoyed hearing about them.
I will say, you mentioned childcare, and that is something that and it is actually, I don't know if it was in response to the pandemic as much as it happened during the pandemic, some real work on the Pullman campus by our graduate and professional student association to figure out creatively what are some opportunities for providing childcare. And they came together, and I'm not gonna remember all the details of this, but I know there's one group that they managed to come together and they set up a sort of shared commitment to taking care of one another's kids. And so there's a window of time when there's no it's after school, or anyway, they're sort of in a little gap of time over the course of the day. And they take turns looking out for each other's kids while the others can then either go to a study group or do some work on their thesis or dissertation or whatever. So, and we're continuing to work with them. They have been, what they've accomplished has been pretty remarkable. We can certainly give you more information about that next time if you would like.
Oh, I mean, I hear about it a lot
Yeah,
from GPSA, so I'm just noticing that I'm like, oh, there were more things that we could have talked about.
Got it.
But it's, just thinking about all those other connections, and then one other area that I'm curious about, and now it's completely gone out of my head. I had it. I'll come back to it.
You may
You know
not,
where to find me.
you may not know this, but are we having any other outbreaks or any, do you know where we're at with that?
Right now, our numbers, to the degree that I know them, and I'm trying to remember if I've got them all the way across campus, they are remarkably low. Our positivity rate for testing is extremely low. There's a graph that I don't have, I have it in my head, and I'll show you, I'll try to do it the right direction, but, it sort of goes up in January when Omicron was doing its thing, and then it just is this precipitous and steady drop. Well, a couple of little blips, the way curves are, the data points are like this, but that curve is just dropping. It's one of the reasons we feel comfortable with following the governor's decision to lift the mask mandate for indoor spaces effective this Saturday. We will continue to monitor campus by campus, because of course each county can be different in terms of what's happening locally. And so we will continue to monitor and are making, sort of empowering each campus to make the decisions it needs to make in terms of what the local number's doing with it. And I think that's just gonna be, for at least in a foreseeable future, I think that's the space we're gonna be in.
It's gonna be there.
Yeah,
There's no doubt
absolutely.
about that. All right, well, thank you very much for that presentation. I think, there's a lot about the students and the way they handled it all, and the university, just dealing with this, because it's unusual. They'll have a story to tell.
Well, it's fun to be able to say, I think during the pandemic, we certainly know, or during these times, it's easy to focus on what we see. We see humans sometimes being their worst. But it's also nice to remind ourselves that we are also seeing humans being their best.
Yeah, very much so. Okay.
I did remember, I knew I was just gonna hide until we moved on. I'm just thinking about opportunities in the moving forward to meet student needs that maybe weren't student needs in previous years because of the pandemic. And you talked about parents being highly involved and maybe students needing some extra support around gaining those independent skills. I also think about social things that students missed out on. Think about our seniors in high school graduating and missing prom. And is there an opportunity for WSU to offer, through student engagement or SED, the student events board, or to provide some of those social milestones that maybe were missed, and as an opportunity to pull people together and continue building those communities. It's something at a much smaller level, but just something I'm thinking about is how are we meeting student needs relevant to the pandemic. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right, so we move on now to our next item, which is the Cougar Pursuit Student Athlete Development. Shelby McKay is here.
Oh,
Hey, Shelby.
thank you all. So the Cougar Pursuit launched in fall of 2020, and normally I would say I would have presented it way back then, but this year is really the first opportunity to really to see it really flourish in person, because all of our programming was really online before. So this is a great time to introduce what we have been doing and then where we see us going this summer, because we have some few projects at the end that I'll talk about there. So our three main pillars are career, leadership, and personal development. And overall, our goal is to prepare student athletes for life after sport, whenever that may be. So we give them all those foundations through these three pillars. So all of our programming is really based off of NACE, which is the National Association for Career Employers. So they have career competencies that employers have identified as what students in undergrad need to achieve when they go out into the work field. So as you see here, we have like critical thinking, communication, and teamwork. Teamwork and leadership are key competencies that student athletes generally get in their time in their sport. But we may not always focus on digital awareness or professionalism, the whole trajectory of career management beyond their sport, and diversity and equity. So we make sure all of our programs connect with these competencies, and we start them out actually in their first year in their orientation course that they all take, where they do e-learning modules around these competencies that we've developed. So they may read some articles on Excel or do like some activities around critical thinking, so they start to think that way, and it's a stepping stone for the rest of our programs that we have. And so just to highlight our staff, I could not do this without this wonderful team. This year we are now fully staffed, and we actually will be hiring one more person. So I have two coordinators here. Janelle, she's really focused on a lot of the career leadership components of our program. And she also advises our Black Student Athlete Association, which I'll talk about in a bit. Nick is brand new. He got here in December, and he's really focused on engaging with our alumni. We have found that we like to bring our alumni back, but CAF, our Cougar Athletic Fund, is very busy fundraising, so they don't always have time to connect with all of those alumni. We would like to build relationships with them. So he's the one who connects with them, but he also does employee relation. So we have a Cougar Pursuit Network, which is a platform where our athletes can engage with employers, apply for jobs, engage with alumni. So it's his job to find the right companies to put onto that platform. We have a graduate assistant every year. Stephanie was actually a former student athlete, so it's been great to have her on board, and she's been helping with our courses. And then earlier back in September, I guess, was the meeting where we had our conversation on name, image, and likeness. So Sherman Neal was there for that, and he's about to finish up his fellowship with us through the McClendon Fellow Program that Coach Kyle Smith donated to for us to have this minority position. But he's been really key on all of our name, image, and likeness. And just coming this next month, we'll start hiring for his replacement, but it'll actually be a full-time position that we'll be hiring for, thanks to a donor that will cover that position for 5 years. So as that dynamic is changing, we're actually focusing on it as student athlete innovation, not specifically name, image, likeness, as we focus a lot on entrepreneurship and what is the unknown of the future of this too.
So is Sherman staying, or is he?
Sherman ends June 30th.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
and he will have a job. We will help him get a job.
Okay. Yeah, he's.
Yes, he's been amazing, yes.
Geez, yes.
So I'm going to start off with career development here. This is actually a picture of before the pandemic, when we had our etiquette dinner where we couple it with networking. We actually were able to do it this year back in the fall with masks spaced out, so wasn't much networking there, but it's one of our most popular events to incorporate etiquette, but then also the networking pieces there. So that's women's basketball.
I'll say that's our women's basketball.
Yeah.
I read it.
So one of the main reasons why we focus on career development is because 98% of student athletes go pro in something other than sports. So it's important to introduce that to them. A lot of people come in with an idea of a major. In the past, like 5, 6, 7 years, we've heard, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer, so they don't really know other jobs that are out there beyond the sport too. So we start to introduce that to them actually in our orientation class. They do the focus 2, which is also done on campus, to learn about different opportunities. So this is kind of our curriculum with our career development, what we hope our student athletes to achieve at their time at WSU. So they all complete their resume in their first semester actually. So we have a resume workshop within our course, and we also use AI technology to go through their resume. We have career coaching appointments with them too, so then they can build upon it. The biggest thing here that maybe an on-campus career center may not be able to provide is that we are able to teach them how to connect their student athlete experience to any profession and talk about the skills that they gain as a student athlete. One of my favorite areas is Clifton Strengths Assessment, so they learn their top 5 strengths. We use that within their team so their coaches can understand them a little bit more, their teammates can understand them a little bit more, help with their leadership growth. So that's a really fun activity to do. To just go into different career programs, we recognize there's lots of programs on campus, so we don't need to be the ones that host all the programs for them, especially like for Carson College, they have a great program, so we give additional workshops if they can't attend the ones within their school. But we track those and see how many student athletes are attending programs frequently. Some of the key, more specific ones we like to focus on is networking, informational interviews, mock interviews as well. But also I say apply to internship or job just to get that experience of actually filling out an application and pressing submit, whether they take it or not. Just knowing what that looks like is really important to them. And so then the next pillar is leadership development. So this photo is actually from just before the pandemic, actually, was our leadership class, UNIV 295. So this is actually a group of our football athletes and then some other students on campus too. The course includes first half of the week, we go through a lecture around leadership skills. And the second half is we go to UREC and do ropes course activities. And one student is leading that class for the day, so they get practical leadership experiences. So we really value this class. It's a 2-credit class that happens in the fall and the spring. So in addition to that, we still have a curriculum around leadership development. So either participating in that course or another leadership course or program on campus. We actually just launched our Leadership Academy. Myself and a former coordinator participated in an NCAA Leadership Academy workshop where we were one of 18 schools that went through a 9-month program to build a leadership academy for our school, focus on research and competencies. So it is a 3-tiered program that we launched, and we just start with our first class this year. And so then we have a lot of other recommendations for leadership opportunities from our Student Athlete Advisory Committee to our Black Student Athlete Association, just experience as a team captain or leadership council. For example, football has leadership council groups. Being part of a student organization, research, work experience, the list continues. Just to gain something outside of their sport is what we're focused on. And as I mentioned before, Black Student Athlete Association or BSAA, this is one of our leadership groups that I like to highlight. This started in fall of 2019 after a couple of or probably actually 8 of our Black student athletes went to, I think it was at the time, Austin, Texas, to the Black Student Athlete Summit. Where they were engaged with other Black student athletes and professionals and really learned the value of creating community. So they've really done that. It's one of our most popular programs. They meet twice a month. Probably 40 to 50 student athletes are coming to this program, which is really hard for us to get that many people to. But they do a lot of educational things and also community-based. So we've done microaggressions to cultural appropriations. We've done a movie night around Black history to a trivia night. So it's one of our really a great program, and we have a donor who funds for us to go to the summit every year. So we'll be sending 6 this year to the one in Houston. And so then the last pillar is personal development. This is a photo from our Butch's Bash that we do every year where we bring our Coug Pals in. So our Coug Pals are all the elementary school students that our student athletes write letters to every week. And we do carnival activities in December. So it's a great community event for our student athletes. So that's one of the areas within personal development is community service. And our hope is that they do pretty much about 10 hours a year around this. We incorporate it into our orientation class to get them introduced to it. But also this includes the NIL stuff. So any personal branding, education or workshops is a recommendation, diversity, equity, inclusion. They all get it in their first year. They do unconscious bias training, but then we have additional topics like power and privilege and using sport as a platform for social change. And then we bring speakers in. Financial literacy is a huge piece within our student athletes. We do basic budgeting in their first year. And actually next month, one of our employers is coming to campus. Allstate is going to do a financial education for our seniors to focus on what's next. And then other cultural events, whether it's on campus or through our groups. CPSA is our Cougar Pride Student Athlete Alliance that we started during the pandemic. So it's a great way to bring our LGBTQIA group together and then allies as well. And so here's just an example. In the background, it's like a 4-year plan, but what a first year experience would look like for our student athletes. And a lot of this is actually within our course, so they don't have to spend a lot of time outside of their hours as they're trying to figure out their day-to-day. But we have one-on-one career coaching with our staff within that course. It's part of that requirement. We do LinkedIn within that class. We do a few community service hours within that. But actually this January, we did a renting and budgeting workshop with them. So they got to hear from upperclassmen that talked about their experiences moving off campus and what to expect for that. So that was a really fun program. And so we have a lot of new initiatives coming up that I did want to share with y'all. We're really excited about these programs that we've been building over the past few years. So the first one is called COUGARSHIP. So it's an internal internship program. Student athletes don't usually have an opportunity to intern during their time as an athlete. The most flexible time is really during the summer, but that still can be challenging, whether they're competing on a national team or camp starts first week in August, so that doesn't fit with the normal cycle of internships. So what better way to get that experience within an organization that actually understands their schedules? So we'll have 10 student athletes in our athletic department intern for 10 weeks. And they'll get paid, and it'll be in a lot of different areas. So say you're a business major, you can intern in our business department and get exposure to that and be able to transfer that to something outside. So to give them that experience, and long-term, we hope to bring it outside of the department and go into the community as well.
Before you leave that slide, how much of a challenge is it for work experience for some of these folks, like say football? And maybe someone like me could hire someone for the summer, but you get in trouble with compliance issues for NCAA. Like, is it a real job or is it just a booster? That kind of stuff. How do you help those kids?
Yeah. To your point about the booster aspect, and that fear is actually a lot easier with name, image, and likeness. It just actually has to be a trend, like something has to be transferred, so work has to be done for money, so to speak. But it's more so the challenge is flexibility. So if you expect them to be in the office from 9 to 5, that's never going to happen because they have lift from like 9 to 10, or they may have class. So they can only do a couple hours a week. So we're doing the 10 hours per week to keep it flexible for them.
It's just curious.
Yeah, it should be easier though now. And then our final program is professional development tours. So another opportunity to help athletes understand what is it like to work in a business beyond what they see within the sports world. So this was also donor funded, similar to NIL, by a couple of donors, to take our student athletes to 3 locations where a lot of our alumni are, and great business opportunities are. So we're launching it this summer. Actually, the first one will be Spokane in June, and we'll bring our internship student athletes and then other student athletes in the area to go up to meet with a few businesses and a few alumni. We actually heard apparently like 30 new student athlete alumni are moving to Spokane this summer. So we're hoping to do a big dinner with them. And then Seattle and Silicon Valley, we're going to do the first week in August with our freshmen. So they will have at the end of their summer bridge program, they'll have an opportunity to go to these 2 locations based off their majors and what companies that we're seeing. So giving those first year student athletes that exposure pretty early on, especially as they start to understand what their majors are, what works for them, does this make sense, learn from different alumni, engage with them. So this actually really got kicked off for Silicon Valley. One of our former student athletes that is at Facebook or Meta, whatever they call it nowadays, is the one who gave for that one too. So we're really excited about that. But that wraps up my presentation.
Are these tours like, how long do they?
Oh, very much. It's 2 days. So they would go up probably like be half the day the first day and most of the day the second day. So they would see probably 3 or 4 companies and have lunch and dinner with a good amount of other alumni.
In all of this professional development, I mean, it looks like there are so many different workshops and trainings that people are doing. How common does salary negotiation come up? And I'm thinking particularly for like gender pay gaps and preparing students to get the salary that they are worth, and you know what I mean, to get their worth out.
That's a good question. We talk about that in like any of our life after sport conversations with our upperclassmen and as they're being prepared to roll out. But it's best one-on-one. So we do the one-on-one career coaching, and when we don't feel confident in the market of that industry, we would recommend campus, because I would not want to advise them the wrong way, because we cannot learn every single industry to understand. But I've gone through salary negotiation education often, so we try to talk through that with them too.
That's great.
Yeah.
you have anything else?
I can't think of anything.
Great presentation,
Thank you. Mhm.
great opportunity.
I know. I didn't have
We
this.
tried to have this, yeah. Yeah, no, it is, it's a tremendous thing to have, and, you know, considering what they need to think of after you
Yes.
get so wrapped up in your sport, just trying to deal with school and everything, that's great.
Yes, yeah.
Well, two
Hey,
really.
this is Pat on Zoom, if you can hear me.
Hi, Pat.
I'm in Las Vegas. Hey, I just want to thank Shelby and her team publicly because what they have done to revamp our student athlete development piece through a pandemic, the fundraising we've been able to do around this, the impact it's had on our athletes and our entire athletic department, because as you can imagine, it's immeasurable, the impact they've had on our young people. But this as a recruiting tool for our coaches is really been a key selling point as we try to attract new student athletes to Washington State. So Shelby and her team continue to do amazing things, and just want you to know how much we appreciate and how fortunate we are to have her and that whole student athlete development team with athletics.
Thank you, Pat.
Either one of you could answer this, but how do we compare to other schools?
So for us, or do you want to go, Pat?
Oh, I'd answer because I think Shelby's gonna be too humble. So yeah. Yeah. I would venture to guess with the I mean, Shelby has such a unique background in this space, and the things she's able to do from a teaching standpoint, programming standpoint. I mean, she is the difference maker for us. So how we compare to other schools, you know, every school, especially in our league. I mean, I would say our league probably is the benchmark nationally on how we do these things. But I think our great differentiator is Shelby's ability to see not only what our assets are within the university, because we partner with a lot of areas on campus to get a lot of these things done, because we know we don't have the expertise in a lot of these spaces, but we know people in Carson and Murrow and all across campus do have this type of expertise, and just understanding the needs of our student athletes and how we marry the two is really where Shelby's expertise is at. So we're proud of this program. We believe as we sell it to as our coaches sell it to prospective student athletes, that it is one of the best of its kind in the country. But a lot of it we're fortunate to have someone like Shelby who can really design and implement at really the highest levels of college athletics.
And just to add to that, we have really set the benchmark within our conference in terms of like staff size. Just now are other schools adding the amount of staff that we have full-time, and we're still growing, which is great to see that we're keep moving the bar. There's only like one or two others that have more than us. And then in terms of the actual programming, there's a few schools that actually don't do any programs or don't have internship opportunities or these tours. There's a couple schools who aren't even allowed to have courses that they can bring their student athletes into. So we've definitely set the bar, and it's really cool I meet with them often. We meet twice a month, the other MEs within the Pac-12. So it's really interesting to compare and see how we've been way above them.
Right. Great job. Great job. Great. Well, hey, I hope that you're with the team in Vegas, Pat.
Yeah, I'm with the team, and Stanford is up on Arizona right now, late in the second half. So hopefully this is one of those days of upsets here at the Pac-12 tournament. But 6:00 tonight, we got UCLA, and we'll be ready for them.
Cool. All right. Well, go Cougs.
Congratulations.
Go Cougs.
Yeah, thanks,
Thanks
Pat.
for joining us.
Well, thank you both for your presentation. Oh, and I should mention here that we do have one action item that we'll be taking up.
Oh, yes, that.
That. You
want me to?
Yeah, just go ahead.
You all had this as a future action item in
Yeah.
January, I think what month we were in.
Yeah,
And so this really is the
we're actually gonna do something.
tomorrow you're actually gonna vote on it. So it is a change to WAC 504-26045, the standards of conduct for students, and it has to do with essentially striking the cross-examination requirement. It's in response to recommendation from the Department of Education, which was in response to some litigation last summer that had an impact on sort of the what had been a requirement for in-person cross-examination in Title IX related matters. This is a welcome change. We are glad to see this shift because it is more appropriate for the kinds of student conduct cases that we're doing on college campuses.
Right.
And it is more compassionate. The way it had been really actually was preventative in terms of student participation and engagement in the process. So that's what this is.
Okay, great. All right, we will take that up tomorrow, I believe.
Yes, that's what happens.
Well, thank you very much for your presentations. Really good. You're just great. And, you know, I just, I'm blown away really by what you offer with this. I can imagine it's a great recruiting tool. And, boy, and just having that opportunity to get a leg up as you consider what your future is going to be. So that's great. Good work. Thank you. Very, very good.
We're fortunate to have all of you. So,
Yeah, yeah. Any other questions from my comrades here? Or I should say colleagues. Say that. Okay, yeah. Bronce compadre. All right, well, I think that is going to wrap up our meeting, and I appreciate your presentations very much. I do want to mention that at the conclusion of the meeting, we are, the Regents, we're going to be taking a short break, and we're going to convene at 2:30 for the Finance and Compliance Committee meeting. YouTube link for the remainder of the meetings can be found on the WSU Board of Regents website. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That red button probably.